I recently moved to a fairly wealthy neighborhood, and I have seen this strange black bench or table-like object in several front yards. They are all very long, about a foot wide, and they do not look sturdy enough to hold much weight. What you found is a joggling board, sometimes called a jostling board. It is a long, narrow, springy outdoor bench, traditionally associated with Charleston and the Low Country region of South Carolina. It is usually made from southern pine because the wood needs to be both strong and flexible. When a person sits on it, the board begins to bounce with a gentle rocking motion, working almost like a wooden spring. That is why, even though the plank looks thin, it is quite difficult to break. The best-known origin story places the joggling board at Acton Plantation in South Carolina around 1803. According to local legend, Mary Kinloch Huger suffered from rheumatism and could no longer take the carriage rides that once helped ease her stiffness through gentle motion. In response, her Scottish relatives sent a model for a springy jostling board, and a plantation carpenter built a version at full size from local timber. By the 19th century, joggling boards were appearing on porches and lawns across the region, especially in homes with wide shaded verandas where families gathered in the evening. There is also another legend connected to this board, and this one is romantic. In Charleston folklore, it became known as a courting bench because a young man and woman could sit at opposite ends, begin bouncing, and slowly slide closer together toward the middle. That gave rise to the amusing old saying that no household with a joggling board ever had an unmarried daughter. Joggling boards are still fairly popular today, especially in Charleston and other parts of the American South. One notable modern patent was issued in 1981, where the board was described as both lawn furniture and an exercise device. I noticed that my neighbors recently placed this object on their wall, facing into our garden, along with some pots and plants. It looks like a mix between a camera and a speaker. At first, we thought it might be a garden speaker, although it seems like a strange place to put one. Does anyone know what it is? This is a motion-activated ultrasonic cat repeller. When a cat moves into the protected area, the unit detects heat and motion, then emits a burst of high-frequency sound meant to make that spot unpleasant for the animal. Many of these devices work in the upper range of hearing, between 21 and 25 kilohertz. Cats can hear much higher sounds than humans, so the sound may bother a cat while being faint or completely unheard by many adults. However, children, teenagers, and adults with sensitive hearing may still hear the sounds this device makes. Devices like this began appearing in the second half of the 20th century. By the 1980s, inventors were already patenting ultrasonic repellers that used pulsing or changing tones, because animals can get used to a steady sound. I've had this object for over a decade, and I still have no idea what it is. It has 3 folding legs, a center section with a spring, and a long rod running through the middle. What you found is a 3-stone cylinder hone, also called a cylinder deglazer. It is a shop tool used to refinish the inner wall of an existing cylinder, such as an engine cylinder. It is used to clean the surface, remove light rust or glaze, and prepare the bore for new piston rings or seals. The tool is designed to be used with an electric drill. The straight shank at the top fits into the drill chuck, and the 3 spring-loaded arms press the abrasive stones outward against the inside wall of the cylinder. As the drill spins the hone, the user moves it up and down through the bore. That combined spinning and stroking motion creates a fine crosshatch pattern on the cylinder wall. That pattern is important because it helps hold a thin film of oil, allowing piston rings or rubber seals to seat properly and move smoothly. I found this in the garage of a house built about 3 years ago, and we are the only people who have lived here. It looks like a PVC pipe sticking down about a foot below the ceiling, and it appears to be about 2 inches in diameter. There's a single red wire behind it, and the bottom is wrapped with tuck tape. What you found is a central vacuum rough-in line, also called a stub-out for a whole-house vacuum system. It is the unfinished connection point where the main vacuum canister and motor would have been installed later. In a finished central vacuum system, the main power unit is usually mounted in a garage, basement, or utility room. Wall inlets are placed around the house, and each inlet connects back to the same pipe network. When someone inserts the vacuum hose into one of those wall ports, the low-voltage circuit closes, the motor starts, and dust is pulled through the pipes to the collection canister in the garage. I saw this object set into the floor in the Zillow listing photos for a 1916 Tudor revival home in Minnesota. It was the last photo in the listing, and it appears to be made of cast iron, although I am not completely sure. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a coal ash carousel, formerly sold as the Sharp Rotary Ash Receiver. It was an ash collection system built into homes heated with coal. The visible part in the floor is the heavy cast iron cover, and beneath it, there would have been a rotating set of metal ash containers arranged in a circle. Once one container under the furnace was full, the user inserted a handle into the central socket and turned the mechanism so the next empty container moved into place. The numbered dial on the cover showed which container was positioned under the ash opening. This allowed the system to hold several weeks of ashes before the bins had to be lifted out and emptied. The device was invented by Warren M. Sharp of Binghamton, New York, and his patent was granted on January 11, 1910. I found this in a horsekeeper's garden, and it looks like some kind of futuristic mobile home. It is sitting on a trailer, and I could not see any doors, although there may have been one on the other side. I did not notice any protruding parts except for the small piece at the front, which looks like some kind of wind meter. This is an eco-capsule, an egg-shaped transportable microhome developed in Slovakia by Nice architects. It is a compact off-grid dwelling designed to provide a sleeping area, a small kitchenette, bathroom facilities, storage, power, and water systems inside a futuristic pod-shaped shell. This egg-shaped model is currently sold for €99,000. The rounded shell helps reduce heat loss and allows rainwater to run down toward collection points. The original idea combined solar panels, a small wind turbine, a battery system, and filtered water storage, so the capsule could be used in remote places without ordinary utility connections. The project began in 2008 as a design competition concept, and after several years of development, it was publicly introduced in 2015 at the Pioneers Festival in Vienna. I have this metal object, possibly brass, made of two separate pieces. The piece on the left seems to be a lid for the piece on the right, and the two cylinders fit into the round holes on top. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an antique double inkwell desk inkstand, also known as a standish. In this model, one opening was meant for writing ink, while the other was meant for fine drying sand or pounce. Before blotting paper became common, wet ink had to be dried carefully, so it would not smear across the page. After writing with a quill or a dip pen, a person would sprinkle fine sand or pounce over the fresh writing, and the perforated lid allowed the powder to spread evenly. The powder absorbed the extra moisture from the ink, and then the paper could be gently tilted so the loose sand fell away. Inkstands like this were a normal part of a well-equipped desk in the 18th and 19th centuries. Lawyers, clerks, merchants, teachers, and letter writers all needed ink close at hand, because dip pens had to be refilled again and again while writing. I found this in an old science classroom. It has several glass cylinders with strange spiral shapes inside, and some of them contain what looks like liquid. I'm not sure how old it is, but it may date from the 1960s to the 1990s. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a set of Geissler tubes, an early type of gas discharge tube used in science demonstrations. They are sealed glass tubes with metal electrodes at the ends, and each tube contains a small amount of low-pressure gas or vapor. When high voltage is applied, electricity passes through the gas and causes it to glow in different colors. The unusual spirals and shaped glass passages were designed to make the glowing discharge more visible and dramatic. This type of tube is named after Heinrich Geissler, a German physicist and skilled glassblower who developed it in 1857. Geissler tubes became popular in classrooms, lecture halls, museums, and public demonstrations. Work with these tubes eventually helped scientists study cathode rays, which led to J.J. Thomson's discovery of the electron in 1897. They also helped lead to later gas discharge devices including neon signs, fluorescent lamps, mercury vapor lamps, and plasma globes. I spotted this in the entrance of an Upscale bar in New Braunfels, Texas. At first, I thought it might be some kind of distillery setup, but I really have no idea what it was used for. This is a Kyoto-style cold drip coffee tower. The basic design is simple. Water sits in the upper glass reservoir, then passes through a small valve that controls the drip rate. Drop by drop, the water falls into the middle chamber filled with ground coffee. From there, the brewed coffee slowly drips into the lower glass container. A full batch can take several hours, and some cafe systems are adjusted to drip for most of the day. Unlike regular cold brew, where coffee grounds are simply steeped in water, the tower slowly passes fresh water through the bed of coffee grounds. This slow brewing process can produce a cleaner, lighter, more aromatic drink, depending on the coffee variety and the grind size. We inherited most of the contents of my grandfather's workshop after he passed away, and these have been sitting in the garage for more than a decade. They look like hollow brass balls attached to slightly curved cylinders, and each one weighs about 1 pound. 2 of them are tied together with string, and one has a metal rod inside, although I am not sure whether it belongs there. These are brass hame tops, also called hame tips. They came from the upper ends of a horse collar harness, where they fitted onto the rigid wooden or metal pieces called hames. In a complete draft horse harness, the padded collar rested against the horse's shoulders, while the hames sat on the outside of that collar and helped transfer the pulling force to the traces. A finished collar normally used 2 hames, one on each side of the horse's neck. The padded horse collar was one of the major advances in transport powered by animals because it allowed a horse to pull from the shoulders instead of putting pressure on the throat. By the 19th century, especially in the United States, harness hardware had become a large industrial trade. Patents from the 1870s show improved hame tops with cast sockets, strap loops, rounded ornaments, and cheaper manufacturing methods. I saw this in the basement of a brand new electrical substation that is still being built. The only name I could read on it was Trench Limited. There are 3 of these in total, each one behind a gate and separated by block walls. I assume there is one for each electrical phase, but I do not know what their purpose is. This is an air core shunt reactor, a large dry-type electrical reactor used in high-voltage substations. Its purpose is to absorb excess reactive power and help control voltage on the electrical grid. Long transmission lines and underground cables can behave a little like giant capacitors, especially when they are lightly loaded. That can cause the voltage to rise higher than the utility wants it to be. A shunt reactor is connected in parallel with the system and acts like a giant inductor, pulling in reactive current and helping bring the voltage back into a safe operating range. It is built from large circular coils of aluminum or copper conductor supported by tall insulators. Because it has an air core, the magnetic field spreads out into the surrounding space. That is why reactors like this are placed behind barriers and separated by walls to protect nearby equipment and people. I got this machine from a friend, and it looks like some kind of pump, but I am not sure what it was used for. Does anyone know what it does? This is a vintage 2-cylinder air compressor, built with a red cast iron compressor pump and driven by an electric motor through a belt and pulley system. The motor turns the flywheel moves the internal pistons, and those pistons draw in air and squeeze it into the small horizontal tank below. Once stored under pressure, that compressed air could be used to inflate tires, blow dust from machinery, run small pneumatic tools, or help with other shop and garage work. This model appears to be associated with the Hartford Machine Screw Company of Hartford, Connecticut, a firm founded in the 19th century by Christopher M. Spencer, the inventor best known for the Spencer repeating rifle. The company began with precision machinery for making screws, but like many American manufacturers of that era, it moved into related mechanical and automotive equipment as the automobile industry grew. We found these at a sale, and were told that they might be from World War I or World War II, but we have not been able to find information about them. They are filled with liquid, about 12 inches tall and very heavy. Does anyone know what they are? What you found are medium voltage liquid power fuses. Their job was to protect transformers, cables, and other electrical equipment by opening the circuit during a short circuit, or another dangerous overcurrent condition. Inside a fuse like this, a calibrated metal element would melt during a fault. At this voltage, simply melting the metal was not enough, because the electricity could keep jumping through the air as an arc. The liquid inside helped cool and extinguish that arc. Some early liquid power fuses used carbon tetrachloride or similar arc extinguishing liquids, and those materials are now considered hazardous. One of the best-known early versions of this type of fuse was developed and patented by Edmund Schweitzer and Nicholas Conrad in the early 20th century. I inherited this large silver ring from my great-grandfather, and I do not know what it represents or how old it is. My dad said it may be Native American in origin, and the ring is quite tarnished now. I believe it may be about 50 years old, and it is large enough that it only fits the middle finger on my husband's hand. Does anyone know what it represents? What you found is a vintage sterling silver ring with a mud head kachina design, also known by the Zuni name Koyemsi. The mud head is a figure from Pueblo ceremonial life in the American Southwest, especially associated with Hopi and Zuni traditions. It is recognized by its rounded head, which appears covered in mud, and by its unusual bulbous features. The mud head kachina is sometimes described as a sacred clown figure. In ceremonies, figures like this could act as helpers, messengers, singers, announcers, and comic performers, using humor to teach lessons and keep the ceremony moving. On jewelry, this figure is usually shown in a lively pose, sometimes with a rattle. The ring appears to have been made in the southwestern United States around the mid-20th century, when Native American silver jewelry became especially popular with collectors, travelers, and galleries. In Hopi jewelry, one common technique was silver overlay, where one sheet of silver was cut into a design and soldered over a darkened lower layer. This created the sharp contrast between bright silver and a dark background. I found this at an estate sale that had many African items collected by a couple during their travels. It looks like some kind of musical instrument, almost like a guitar, but the strings do not seem to be adjustable or tunable. There are 5 vertical strings on each side, and the upper string appears to be double braided. What you found is a West African kora, or more precisely, a simplified decorative instrument in the style of a kora. The large round body is traditionally made from a calabash gourd covered with animal hide, and together, these parts form the resonator that gives the instrument its warm, ringing sound. A full traditional kora usually has 21 strings, with 11 on one side and 10 on the other. The player holds the 2 vertical hand posts, then uses the thumbs and index fingers of both hands to pluck the strings. The kora is closely associated with the Mandinka and broader Mande cultures of West Africa, especially in countries such as Gambia, Senegal, Mali, and Guinea. It was traditionally played by hereditary musicians and oral historians known as jali, or griots. These performers preserved family histories, praised important people, recited genealogies, and carried old stories from one generation to the next. The first known mention of the instrument in Western literature dates to the late 18th century, when the Scottish explorer Mungo Park described a large West African harp with 18 strings during his travels along the Gambia River. I found this object and feel like it might have been used with maps, but I'm not sure. It folds in half, and there is nothing on the back of it. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a folding traveler from the 19th century, also known as Brackett's circular rule. It is a compact measuring instrument that combines a rolling distance measurer with a protractor. When opened, it forms a circular rule with measurement marks around the outer edge. When folded, it becomes small enough to carry in a pocket. It was made for measuring curved lines, distances, and angles on drawings, plans, patterns, or other surfaces. The device was invented by Cephas Brackett of Jordan, New York, and his patent was granted on October 13, 1885. To measure distance, the user rolled the outer edge along the line being measured. The wheel was designed so that one full revolution represented a known length, essentially working like a miniature odometer. A small internal counting mechanism helped track the rotations, while the markings on the rim allowed the user to read any remaining fraction of the distance. I dug this up in a backyard in rural Australia. It appears to be made of ceramic, but I have no idea what it was used for. What you found is most likely the hard inner piece from an old mechanical toy growler, the sound mechanism that was placed inside a teddy bear, doll, or other stuffed animal. A complete growler would have included a small case, a bellows, a metal reed, and a moving ceramic weight. When the toy was tilted or squeezed, air was pushed across the reed, creating a growling, crying, or grumbling sound. Toy growlers became popular in the early 20th century. Steiff, one of the most famous German teddy bear makers, had added growler voices to some of its bears by 1908. During the 1920s, several patents described similar toy sound mechanisms. I found this in my father's antique collection, and neither of us knows what it is. I think it may be made of silver, and it is very heavy. Both parts open up, and the smaller section has some kind of old residue inside, so I am afraid to touch it in case it could be unsafe. It looks handmade, but I could not find any silver mark anywhere on it. What you found is an antique betel nut and lime holder, a decorative container used for preparing betel quid, also known as pan in South Asia. The larger rounded compartment would have held pieces of areca nut, prepared betel ingredients, or tobacco, while the smaller chained container was made for slaked lime. The white residue inside the smaller compartment is probably old lime paste. This is not something to touch with bare hands because slaked lime is caustic and can irritate the skin, even after the container has been sitting unused for many years. Betel chewing is one of the oldest social habits in Asia and the Pacific. Long before written records, people in Southeast Asia were already combining areca nut, betel leaf, and lime. Over time, the custom spread across India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Malaysia, and many island cultures. In many places, offering betel was a gesture of hospitality, much like offering tea or coffee. I saw this set of two large rounded tanks mounted on a trailer with piping and some machinery attached to them. They look like they are meant for some kind of industrial or service work. Does anyone know what they are used for? This is a mobile propane dispenser calibration trailer. It is a specialized measuring device used to check whether the meters on propane dispensers and delivery trucks are recording the correct amount of fuel. The rounded tanks on the trailer are calibrated pressure vessels. During a test, propane is pumped into one of these tanks. The amount shown on the seller's meter is then compared with the actual amount collected inside the calibration tank, and if the two do not match, the seller's meter is calibrated. This protects both the customer and the business, because a bad meter can shortchange the buyer or accidentally give away too much propane. The idea behind this device goes back to early 20th century fuel pump testing, when inspectors used calibrated measures to check gasoline and kerosene pumps. Theophilus A. Seraphin was one of the important figures in this field, and his 1918 patent helped shape later field standards. When propane became more widely used, the same measuring principles were adapted for a liquid stored under pressure. I found this at a local charity shop in Brussels. It has a small wand with an abrasive tip, and the wand is connected to the main device by a coiled cord. It does not seem to rotate or vibrate. Does anyone know what it is? This is a vintage plant light and moisture meter. It closely matches the Micronta light and moisture meter for plants that was sold by Radio Shack. The wand with the pointed end was meant to be pushed into the soil of a potted plant. In moisture mode, the probe uses the soil itself as part of a simple electrical test. Damp soil conducts electricity better than dry soil, so the needle moves across the scale and gives a general reading from dry to wet. In light mode, the same handheld unit measured the amount of light reaching the plant. The readings were approximate, but they were enough to tell whether the plant was getting enough light from a window or a lamp. I saw this suit of armor in a museum. It dates from around 1530 to 1573 and belonged to the Duke of Saxe-Weimar. There's a strange metal lever attached near the shoulder. Does anyone know what it was used for? This is a lance rest, also known by its French name arrêt de cuirasse. It played a key role in mounted combat during the age of full-plate armor, roughly between the late 14th and late 16th centuries. The purpose of the lance rest was to stop the weapon from sliding backward upon impact. Without it, the full force of the blow would travel through the knight's arm, striking the hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder. This made it much harder to control the lance and increased the risk of serious injury. But with a lance rest, the impact was absorbed by the breastplate and transferred directly into the torso, allowing the knight to deliver a much stronger blow while staying protected. To make the system even more effective, knights used a small ring on the lance itself called a grapper. This ring sat just behind the hand grip and locked against the lance rest when the weapon was held under the arm. On impact, the grapper would catch on the bracket, creating a rigid connection between the lance and the armor. Most lance rests were hinged and could be folded up after the initial charge. That way, once the lance was discarded and the knight drew his sword, the rest wouldn't interfere with his right arm during close combat. I saw this unusual object at the Vatican Museum, but there was no label explaining what it is. It looks like it's made of metal, with a small animal figure on top and several curved prongs sticking out from the sides. Does anyone know what it was used for? What you found is an ancient Egyptian sistrum, a sacred musical instrument used in temples and religious ceremonies. It consists of a metal frame, often shaped like a small arch or shrine, with crossbars that hold loose metal rods or rings. When shaken, these produced a bright, rhythmic, jingling sound. The sistrum was especially associated with the worship of Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and joy, whose sacred animal, the cow, is echoed in the instrument's shape. Some examples, like this one, were decorated with figures of cats or goddesses, symbolizing fertility and divine protection. In ancient Egypt, only women and priestesses were typically allowed to play the sistrum during temple rituals. It was believed that the sound of the instrument could please the gods, drive away evil spirits, and even influence natural events such as the flooding of the Nile. I found this unusual stringed instrument at a garage sale in southern Pennsylvania. It's made of wood, measures about 28 by 7 inches, and has a total of 30 strings. Does anyone know what kind of instrument this is? What you've found is a ukulele, a hybrid string instrument that combines elements of the violin and the Hawaiian ukulele. It was introduced in the 1920s and sold mostly in the United States, often by door-to-door salesmen who marketed it as an easy-to-play instrument for the whole family. It was played by bowing the melody strings with the right hand while plucking the chord strings with the left. Despite its friendly image, the ukulele turned out to be quite tricky to master. Playing required coordination between bowing and plucking, and the sound was often difficult to control. Many owners were disappointed and returned the instrument, some even before finishing their payment plans. It originally sold for about $35 to $40, which was a significant amount at the time. For many families, that investment felt wasted once they realized how hard the ukulele was to play. I found this wooden object backstage in a concert hall. It's about 2 or 3 feet tall, with a cloth draped over the top and a crank handle on the side. Does anyone know what it's used for? This is a vintage theatrical wind machine, also known as an iolophone. It was used backstage in theaters and concert halls throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries to create the sound of wind during live performances. By cranking the wooden drum, which had slats on its surface against a tightly stretched fabric, the operator could produce anything from a gentle breeze to a howling gale. These devices were essential before the advent of recorded sound. Shakespearean plays like King Lear, melodramas, and even orchestral works relied on them for dramatic effect. Composers such as Maurice Ravel and Richard Strauss included wind machine parts directly in their scores. I found this unusual metal object while working in rural Sicily. It's about 10 inches long and looks like it might be made of bronze. Does anyone know what this could have been used for? What you found is a strigil, a curved bronze tool, once used by Greeks and Romans for personal cleansing after exercise or bathing. Instead of using soap, athletes and bathers would cover themselves in oil and then scrape it off with this tool, removing sweat, dirt, and dust. This kind of tool was usually made of bronze or iron and was often paired with small oil flasks called aryballoi. Beyond its practical use, the strigil also carried strong cultural significance. It appears throughout ancient art, from vase paintings to statues like the famous Apoxiomenos, which shows an athlete using one. The tool symbolized physical strength, cleanliness, and beauty, all traits highly valued in Greek society. Interestingly, the strigil was often placed in tombs as a burial offering, usually alongside a bottle of oil. This practice extended from Greece to Etruria and Rome and symbolized purification and readiness for the afterlife. Archaeologists have found examples made not only of bronze and iron, but also silver, sometimes engraved with the owner's name. I walk past this object on my way to work. It's about 6 feet tall and usually has a cover on it, but today it was open. The chart inside has days of the week written on it, and it's located next to a semi-busy road. Does anyone know what it's used for? This is a municipal water pressure chart recorder, a mechanical device used throughout the 20th century to track water pressure in real time. These recorders were commonly installed by water utilities and fire departments at pump stations, hydrants, or key points in the distribution system. Inside the metal box, a rotating circular chart and ink pen recorded changes in pressure, creating a visual timeline that helped engineers monitor performance and detect issues. The technology dates back to the late 1800s, when inventor William Henry Bristol patented the first practical chart recorder using a flexible metal tube known as a Bourdon spring. As pressure increased, the tube would flex, moving a pen that marked the pressure readings onto paper. By the 1920s, cities across the United States had widely adopted these devices. I first thought this was a tire gauge, but it's definitely not airtight. The center part pulls out but doesn't come off, and it has markings up to 120 with halfway tick marks. Does anyone know what this is used to measure? This brass object is a black powder measure used by shooters in the 18th and 19th centuries to load muzzle-loading firearms with a consistent amount of gunpowder. The earliest powder measures were improvised from antler or even turkey wing bones, but by the 1800s, manufacturers began producing adjustable brass versions. Some, like the patented Bridgeport Gun Implement Company model from 1890, featured telescoping tubes with engraved graduations, allowing the shooter to select the exact volume in grains or drams. I found these green, orange, blue, and yellow pieces in a shop in Bruges, Belgium. They look old, and each one is a little smaller than a cell phone. Does anyone know what they were used for? These are Belgian bicycle license plates that were issued from the late 19th century into the mid-20th century. Each year, cyclists received a new tag as proof that the annual bicycle tax had been paid. The plate was bolted to the bike, usually on the rear fender or the frame, so an officer could read the city, the year, and the number at a glance. Colors changed from year to year, which made expired tags easy to spot. The system operated through most of the 20th century and was phased out in the late 1980s, when the small tax no longer justified the bureaucracy. I found this lamp at a rummage sale. The seller claims it's worth $200. It looks like some kind of kerosene lantern. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a vintage railroad switch lamp. It was used on railroads to indicate the position of a track switch, showing train crews whether the rails were set for the main line or a diverging track. Each side of the lantern had colored glass lenses, usually red and green, which rotated along with the switch mechanism. These lamps became standard on railroads by the late 19th century. Patents from the 1890s and early 1900s introduced features like shock-absorbing mounts and non-sweating ventilation systems to keep the flame steady in wind and rain. I came across this odd multi-headed lamp on an online marketplace. The seller wrote, "Don't know what it is, best offer." Does anyone know what it is? This is a multi-headed infrared hair processing lamp, a type of salon equipment widely used from the mid-20th century to speed up treatments like coloring, bleaching, and conditioning. Its flexible arms hold the glowing red infrared bulbs that gently warm the hair without using air, helping chemical processes develop faster and more evenly. Infrared technology entered the beauty industry around the 1950s, gradually replacing the bulky hood dryers that had dominated salons since the 1930s. Engineers soon began designing specialized infrared heaters for hair, and by 1981, companies like Clairol had patented devices that used targeted wavelengths for more efficient heating. Around that time, the American company Pibbs introduced an improved version with multiple adjustable arms. Its distinctive design earned it the nickname Medusa among stylists. I found these two plastic pieces under the bed in a hotel room in Hamilton, Ontario. They look like parts of some kind of circuit, but I have no idea what they're for. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is part of a Snap Circuits kit, a popular educational toy that helps kids learn about electronics by snapping components together like puzzle pieces. The pieces in the photo are a 100-ohm resistor module and a photoresistor module used to build simple circuits for lights, sounds, or motion detection. Each module has metal snap connectors, allowing children to safely experiment without tools or soldering. Snap Circuits was created in the late 1990s by Elenco Electronics, a small company based in Illinois. Their idea was to simplify old-fashioned circuit kits by making everything modular, colorful, and intuitive. The first full set launched in 2002, and the product quickly became a hit in the United States. It has won more than 30 industry awards and has been used in schools, libraries, and science museums to teach the basics of electricity. I found this strange object in a rental house. It's made entirely of metal, and there were no other parts with it. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a coil tattoo machine, a classic device used by professional tattoo artists to create permanent body art. It operates using a pair of electromagnetic coils that rapidly drive a needle up and down, puncturing the skin to deposit ink. The coil tattoo machine was first patented in 1891 by Samuel O'Reilly, who adapted his design from Thomas Edison's electric stencil pen. Soon after, inventors in both the United States and the United Kingdom began improving the concept. By the early 20th century, dual coil machines had become the standard. Key figures like Charlie Wagner and Percy Waters helped turn tattooing into a commercial and cultural phenomenon, promoting it through mail-order kits and its growing popularity among sailors, soldiers, and circus performers. I found this strange case in my grandparents' house in Germany. It contains several glass tubes with metal ends, likely for electrical connections. All of the tubes can be inserted into the black handheld device that connects to the power box. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Janine-Nerva violet ray device, a quack medical gadget from the early 20th century. When plugged in, it generated high-frequency electricity that made the glass tubes glow, releasing small electric shocks and a faint ozone smell. It was marketed as a miracle treatment for arthritis, skin conditions, and even hair loss. The technology behind it was loosely inspired by Nikola Tesla's experiments with high-frequency currents in the 1890s. By the 1920s, companies in the United States and Europe mass-produced these devices under brand names like Renew Life, Master, and Generva. They were sold in drugstores, mail-order catalogs, and beauty salons. But by the 1950s, the United States Food and Drug Administration banned their sale for medical use due to false health claims. My dad drives for Uber and found this unusual metal pen or stylus in his car after a passenger left it behind. There are no markings or labels on it. Does anyone recognize what it is? This is a tactical pen, a self-defense tool disguised as a regular writing instrument. These pens are typically made from aircraft-grade aluminum or steel and often feature a hardened tip that can also be used to break glass in an emergency. The concept of the tactical pen dates back to the 1960s and was inspired by the Japanese kubotan, a compact, rod-shaped tool used for self-defense. The modern version was developed in the early 2000s by knife maker Rick Hinderer, who had the idea to combine the functionality of a pen with the durability and striking force of a kubotan. I saw this strange wooden contraption in the bathroom at a tavern near where I work. It's made of heavy wood and has some kind of mechanism in the center. Does anyone know what this is? What you saw is an antique foot-powered mortising machine, used in woodworking during the 1800s to cut square holes into wood. These holes were part of a mortise and tenon joint, one of the oldest and strongest methods for joining two pieces of wood. Instead of carving the mortise by hand with a chisel and mallet, the user would step on a pedal to drive a sharp chisel straight into the wood. This machine helps speed up furniture making, door construction, and window frame assembly in small workshops and early factories. Some models, like the ones made by the Greenlee brothers in the 1870s, used a drill bit inside a square chisel to cut perfect square holes in a single motion. I came across this vintage optical device made of brass. It has crosshairs visible through the lens. It seems like some kind of sighting attachment, maybe for an old ship instrument. What you found is a British optical gun sight made by Ross of London during the Second World War. It was used by the Royal Navy as an aiming scope for anti-aircraft guns. The angled eyepiece allowed gunners to look down into the scope while tracking fast-moving aircraft, even when the gun barrel was raised high. Ross was one of the United Kingdom's leading optical manufacturers, and their sights were trusted across all branches of the British Armed Forces. The Pattern G 332M offered about 3 times magnification and a wide field of view, making it perfect for quick, precise aiming in combat situations. I found this old metal tool while going through a family friend's toolbox. It doesn't have any markings or numbers on it. Does anyone know what this could have been used for? What you found is a rotary cutter, a handheld tool designed to cut fabric using a rolling circular blade. Unlike scissors, which lift and shift the cloth as they cut, a rotary cutter glides smoothly across the surface, making long, straight cuts with minimal distortion. This tool was invented in 1979 by Yoshio Okada, the founder of the Olfa Corporation in Japan. Inspired by the need to improve cutting tools for seamstresses, he adapted the concept of a rolling blade to create the first rotary cutter. Although it was originally developed for garment factories, it quickly gained popularity among American quilters in the early 1980s. I found this at a country flea market in Sweden. It's a strange leather item with what looks like a mesh filter on one side, but the hole doesn't go all the way through. The wooden stick fits into the narrow part, almost like a plug, and the whole thing seems really well made. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a forestry chalk tree marker, a tool used by foresters to make temporary marks on tree trunks using powdered chalk. The leather pouch is filled with fine chalk dust, and the wooden stick is inserted into the narrow opening to seal it. When the pouch is slapped against a tree, a small puff of chalk is pushed through the mesh screen and leaves a visible mark on the bark. These tools became common in the mid-20th century, especially before spray paints and flagging tape were widely used. They were valued because they caused no lasting damage to the trees and were used in timber surveys, forest research, and even at logging auctions. I was out in South Charlotte on a warm and cloudy afternoon. The temperature was around 80 degrees. When I looked up, I saw this unusual sight in the sky. I've never seen clouds with these kinds of rainbow colors before. Does anyone know what this is? What you saw is a phenomenon called cloud iridescence. It occurs when sunlight interacts with tiny water droplets or ice crystals in high-altitude clouds like cirrus or altocumulus. These droplets scatter light through a process known as diffraction, producing pastel or rainbow-like colors that resemble the shimmer of soap bubbles or oil on water. The effect is easiest to see when the sun is partially blocked by something like a building, a tree, or even your hand, since its brightness can otherwise overpower the colors. I found this large, hollow metal structure on the back roads of Vancouver Island, sitting on a hillside overlooking a valley. There are no wires or power connected to it, but there's a hand winch on the back that lets you adjust the angle. Does anyone know what this thing is? What you found is a passive microwave repeater. It's a large reflective panel used to bounce radio or microwave signals over obstacles like hills or valleys when a direct line of sight isn't possible. Unlike active relay stations, passive repeaters don't amplify the signal or require a power source. They rely entirely on the angle of reflection to direct the signal, and the winch on the back lets you fine-tune that alignment. We found this old photo in a collection of my step-grandmother's belongings. Based on the style and condition, we think it might be from Eastern Europe in the late 1800s. What is the man wearing across his chest? This is a choka, a traditional woolen coat worn by men in the Caucasus region, particularly in Georgia. The most distinctive feature is the row of cylindrical holders across the chest, known as gaziers. Originally, these were used to carry pre-measured charges of gunpowder and bullets for muzzle-loading rifles, allowing quick reloading in battle. The design placed the ammunition high on the chest, keeping it dry and within easy reach, especially for mounted warriors. The choka evolved over centuries, influenced by Persian and Central Asian styles. It gained its iconic look in the 18th and 19th centuries when firearms became widespread in the region. I've had this old bottle for years, but I've never been able to figure out how old it might be or what oxygen treatment actually means. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you found is a dental reagent bottle from the 1920s, produced by the L.D. Koch Company. This solution, also known as ammonia water, was part of a professional root canal treatment system called Oxygen. Developed by Koch around 1921, the Oxygen method was designed to sterilize infected pulp canals using a chemical flush made by mixing ammonium hydroxide with hydrogen peroxide. Dentists applied this solution inside the tooth to disinfect and prepare the canal before sealing it with an alkaline filling paste. I came across these blue dome-shaped objects in a field in Saskatchewan. They seemed to be scattered randomly and looked rigid, not like fabric. Does anyone know what they are? These are leafcutter bee shelters, commonly known as bee domes. These bright blue structures are used in Western Canada to house alfalfa leafcutter bees, solitary pollinators that outperform honeybees on crops like alfalfa. Inside each dome are rows of nesting boards with small tunnels, where female bees lay their eggs and build nests using bits of leaves. By placing these shelters directly in the fields, farmers significantly boost pollination rates and crop yields. Unlike honeybees, leafcutters have no hive or queen. Each female works independently, yet they nest together in these bee condos. Farmers collect the cocoons at the end of the season, store them over the winter, and restock the domes the following year. I found this large machine in the basement of the supermarket where I work. The space is used for long-term storage. On the other side of the machine, there's a cartoon-style drawing of a baker. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a conical dough rounder, a piece of industrial bakery equipment made by Werner and Fleiderer, a German company that's been designing bread machinery since the late 1800s. This machine was used to take raw, divided pieces of dough and gently roll them into smooth, uniform balls, ready for proofing and baking. It works using a rotating cone and a spiral track that mimic the circular motion a baker would make with their hands, only much faster and more consistent. Werner and Fleiderer began producing machines like this as early as the 1890s in response to the growing demand for mass-produced bread. These rounders helped automate what had previously been a fully manual task, and by the early 20th century, they were being used everywhere, from large commercial bakeries to military field kitchens. I found this while scuba diving in a river in Eastern Europe near a small town with some World War II history. It looks old, and I was wondering if it might be related to the war. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a Wehrmacht gas mask canister from World War II, officially known as the Gasmaskenbuchse. It was designed to keep the mask clean, dry, and protected from damage with a tight sealing lid and a spring-loaded bottom that helped push the mask out quickly in an emergency. Although every German soldier was required to carry one, gas masks were almost never used in actual combat. Fearing retaliation, chemical weapons were never deployed on a large scale during the war. As a result, many soldiers ended up using the canister to store personal items like food, cigarettes, or extra gear. I came across these heavy-duty steel doors near Stonington, Connecticut. They're located close to an industrial area behind the Pawcatuck River, which separates Connecticut from Rhode Island. Does anyone know what they are used for? This is a heavy-duty flood protection door. These massive steel gates are built into flood walls, levees, and are designed to swing shut during coastal storms or river flooding. Under normal conditions, they remain open to allow traffic or water to pass through. But when closed, they form a watertight barrier capable of holding back storm surges. The idea of movable floodgates has been around for centuries, but modern steel flood doors started appearing in the mid-20th century in response to catastrophic floods and hurricanes. After deadly storms in the 1930s and 1950s, the United States Army Corps of Engineers began constructing large hurricane barriers with integrated floodgates throughout New England. Someone sent me this strange road sign, and I've never seen anything like it before. Does anyone know what it means? This sign is a piece of local humor found in Alaska, particularly near Denali National Park. It taps into a long-running Alaskan joke that mosquitoes are so large and aggressive they should be considered the state bird. I noticed these boxes mounted on a lamppost in Germany. They were installed overnight, and I've never seen anything like them before. Does anyone know what this is? This is a radar traffic counter, commonly used in Germany and other European countries for monitoring vehicle speed and traffic flow. Unlike speed cameras, it doesn't take photos or issue tickets. Instead, it uses Doppler radar to measure the speed, size, and number of passing vehicles. This allows city officials to collect accurate traffic data in a discreet and privacy-friendly way. Some models also measure air quality and noise levels, which helps cities monitor pollution along busy roads. I saw this strange-looking vessel on the west coast near Pacifica. It's about 10 feet long and looks like either a small submarine or a very round boat. Does anyone know what this is? What you found appears to be a small ocean rowing boat, most likely a custom-built or homemade version inspired by professional expedition craft. These vessels are designed for open water travel and usually feature a narrow hull, a compact sleeping cabin, and sealed compartments to keep the boat buoyant even after capsizing. Ocean rowing has a long history, beginning with the first Atlantic crossing in 1896. Boats like this are typically used for adventure races or record-setting solo voyages. Rowers sleep inside the small, watertight cabin and row in shifts. I live on the 5th floor of a 7-story building in downtown Vienna, Austria. From my balcony, I can see a yellow square mounted on the wall of the building across from me. I believe that building might be a school. Does anyone know what this object is? This is a reflective survey target used in structural monitoring. These bright yellow squares are placed on buildings so surveyors can track even the slightest movement with millimeter-level accuracy. Using a total station, engineers aim a laser or infrared beam at the target and measure the exact distance and angle. If the building begins to shift or settle, these targets help detect it. Survey targets like this became widely used in the late 20th century, especially in cities where underground construction, such as subway tunnels, could impact nearby structures. I found this in the house of my stepfather's dad, who used to keep all kinds of random things. It looks like some kind of banknote, but I can't tell if it was ever real currency since it just says banknote and everything is written in a different language. Does anyone know what this banknote is? What you found is a banknote from the Weimar Republic, printed during the period of extreme hyperinflation that hit Germany after World War I. Between 1921 and 1923, the value of German money collapsed so severely that people needed wheelbarrows full of banknotes just to buy a loaf of bread. By the end of 1923, one United States dollar was worth more than 4 trillion marks. The crisis began when Germany attempted to pay off its massive war debt by printing more and more paper money. The situation became worse when the country was required to make reparations to the Allied powers. In 1923, after French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr industrial region, Germany ordered workers to go on strike and paid them using newly printed banknotes. This caused inflation to spiral even further out of control. I found this strange metal object at a thrift store. It's made of iron and has 2 spiked wheels on the end that spin and make a high-pitched noise when they hit each other. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a garden weasel, a hand-powered gardening tool introduced in the United States in the 1970s. It has a long handle with spinning spiked wheels that loosen soil, uproot weeds, and aerate small garden beds. You simply roll it over the ground, and the rotating tines dig in and churn the soil. The tool was invented in West Germany and later brought to the United States. It gained popularity through TV commercials and became a household name thanks to its unique design and unusual name. I found these 2 cartridges labeled TV Game Cartridge at a charity shop here in the UK. I don't recognize what console they belong to, and there's no other information on them. Does anyone know what these cartridges are for? What you found are cartridges made for the Dendy console, a Russian version of Nintendo's Famicom system. The Dendy was never an official Nintendo product. It was an unlicensed clone built in Taiwan and China for a Russian company called Steepler. Released in 1992, it became the first mass-market game console in post-Soviet Russia and introduced millions of children to video games for the very first time. The cartridges used with the Dendy were Chinese copies of Nintendo games. I found this brass object in a shop in Bristol, United Kingdom. There's a pin that folds out from the side, but that's all I know about it. I'm really curious to find out what it might have been used for. This brass object is a demolition detonator key and spike, a compact tool once used by miners and military engineers to arm and fire explosive charges. The folding spike was pushed into a stick of dynamite to make a clean opening for a detonator, and the notched key on the opposite end was used to lock a blasting cap into place or to operate a blasting machine. Its brass construction was intentional, since brass will not spark when struck against rock or metal, which made the tool much safer to use around volatile explosives. Tools of this kind appeared in the early 20th century as industries like mining and quarrying expanded and the need for safer blasting equipment grew. In coal mines, only a certified shot firer or pit deputy was allowed to carry the key because it was the final step needed to fire a charge. I saw this hanging in the window of my local hardware store in upstate New York. It looks like it's made of cast iron. I have no idea what it was used for. Does anyone know what this thing is? What you've found is a holivala, more commonly known today as a Lewis lifting device. This tool was used by stonemasons to lift heavy stone blocks. The three pieces are inserted together in a hole drilled into the stone, and when the central wedge is hoisted upon it, wedges the packing pieces out so tightly against the sides of the hole as to enable the stone to be lifted. The design goes back to ancient Greece and Rome, where it revolutionized the way monumental structures were built. The Romans used holivalas extensively in their temples, aqueducts, and fortifications, and the technique carried on through the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. By the early 20th century, engineers in the United States were still improving the design. Philip Netto patented an enhanced version in 1908 that introduced pivoting jaws for an even stronger grip. I found this item at a thrift store, and there were several others just like it in the same box, possibly in different sizes. It looks like it was part of some kind of machine or device. Does anyone know what this is? This is a type element from an IBM Selectric typewriter, often called a golf ball because of its rounded shape and raised characters. Introduced in 1961, the Selectric revolutionized office typing by replacing the traditional type bar mechanism with a single rotating and tilting print head. This made typing faster, eliminated jams, and allowed users to change fonts just by swapping out the ball. The concept behind this innovation was developed by IBM engineers in the 1950s and patented as a single-element printing head. Although the early design was met with skepticism from IBM leadership, the mechanism became the centerpiece of the Selectric typewriter, which quickly became a staple in American offices. A friend found this metal object in the woods, and I haven't seen it in person, but I'm wondering if it could be military. It looks like some kind of cylindrical device with metal fins, maybe part of a flare or something similar. This is a military parachute flare, most likely a United States M127A1 or a similar NATO-issued illumination device. These flares were designed to be launched by hand, shoot into the sky like a small rocket, and then deploy a parachute to suspend a burning flare overhead. Their purpose was to illuminate large areas during night operations or to send visual signals, and similar models have been widely used by armed forces since the mid-20th century. These flares are not harmless. Even decades after manufacture, they may still contain live propellant or ignition charges. There have been documented cases where similar devices ignited unexpectedly when handled. I found this strange plastic tool in my grandmother's house. It's about 8 inches long. When you pull back on the narrow end, a spring-loaded mechanism pushes out a bunch of small needles from the larger end. Does anyone know what this is? This is a modern replica of a 19th century medical device called the Lebenswecker, or Life Awakener, invented by German mechanic Karl Baunscheidt in the 1840s. The original version was a sleek tool with an ebony handle, fitted with about 30 fine spring-loaded needles that punctured the skin to create tiny wounds. These punctures were then treated with a special irritant oil to provoke redness, swelling, and blisters. Baunscheidt claimed this process could draw out bad fluids and cure a wide range of diseases from rheumatism and asthma to mental disorders. His inspiration came from an odd personal experience. He once felt relief from his arthritis after being bitten by mosquitoes, which led him to develop a mechanical device that mimicked the sensation and supposed benefits of insect stings. Marketed as a universal remedy, the Lebenswecker quickly gained popularity across Europe and North America. Although Baunscheidt never held a medical license, he successfully patented versions of the device in the United States and in the United Kingdom. However, by the early 1900s, the Lebenswecker's reputation began to unravel. Courts started prosecuting unlicensed practitioners in scientific medicine, gradually exposed the treatment as ineffective and potentially dangerous. I found 2 of these tools left behind in an office. They're about the length of an ink pen and only open to about an inch. The person who worked there was a communications director and also a hobby photographer. Does anyone know what this tool is? What you've found is a pad counter, a specialized tool used in printing and binding to divide large stacks of paper into evenly sized pads. The flat metal blade is inserted into the edge of a paper ream to separate a specific number of sheets, often guided by an adjustable depth gauge. These tools became common in the early 20th century, especially in commercial print shops and copy centers. The design has barely changed over the decades. Most models feature a wooden handle, a metal spade blade, and an adjustable L-shaped bar that sets the depth. My dad found this in the trash at his school. He works in the physics department, and a colleague was cleaning out storage and didn't know what it was either. It has two levers that can be pushed down, and it looks like some kind of heavy-duty press. Does anyone know what this machine is? This is a vintage belt lacer press, also known as a flat belt splicing machine. Its primary purpose was to join the ends of flat leather transmission belts by pressing a row of wire hooks into both ends. A metal pin would then be inserted through the hooks to create a flexible, hinged joint. This simple mechanical splice made belt repairs faster and far more reliable than older hand-laced methods. These belts were commonly used to transfer power in factories, mills, and agricultural equipment before the widespread use of electric motors. The design you're looking at likely dates from the early 20th century and may have been manufactured by the Clipper Belt Lacer Company, one of the most influential names in this field. Their system was originally developed in the 1900s and quickly gained popularity for its efficiency. I found this set of black plastic pieces while cleaning out a friend's shed. Each one has a unique outer shape with bumps and is labeled with red letters or numbers. Does anyone know what these are? What you found is a set of vintage sewing machine pattern cams, also known as stitch cams. These small plastic inserts were used in mid-20th century sewing machines to control decorative stitching. When placed into compatible machines, each cam guided the needle or fabric feed in a unique pattern, producing zigzags, scallops, arrowheads, and more. These cams reached peak popularity in the 1950s and 1960s. They were often sold as part of the machine package with brands like Singer, Kenmore, and Brother. My landlord found this heavy metal object in the basement. It looks like it might have had a wooden handle at some point, but this is all that's left. Does anyone know what this thing is? What you found is a vintage soldering iron, most likely from the late 19th or early 20th century. It was used to join metal parts by heating a soft alloy called solder until it melted and flowed between two metal surfaces. This type of tool was used by tinsmiths, plumbers, and metalworkers before electric soldering irons were invented. Craftsmen often kept several irons heating at once, rotating them during big jobs like repairing roofs, sealing lead pipes, or building tinware. Many believe that this is where the expression, "too many irons in the fire," comes from. I found these tiny jars filled with colored liquid while biking near the F1 track in Montreal. They're smaller than my thumb, and I saw crates full of them. Does anyone know what this is? These tiny glass vials are used in Chinese Lantern Festival sculptures. They are filled with colored water, sealed, and then attached to a metal frame to create glowing figures such as dragons, peacocks, or flowers. This technique began in the 1960s in Zhejiang, China, when festival artisans started repurposing discarded medicine bottles for lantern displays. Over time, the method became one of the city's signature innovations and later spread worldwide as Chinese lantern festivals expanded to North America and Europe. I saw this strange plastic dome structure while boating along the Trent-Severn waterway. It's sitting right on the shoreline, and none of my friends could figure out what it is. Does anyone know what it is? This is a Sky Shed pod, which stands for Personal Observatory Dome. It's a prefabricated plastic dome designed for amateur astronomers who want a dedicated place to keep and use their telescopes. The structure opens at the top and rotates, allowing users to observe the night sky while staying shielded from wind, light, and the elements. The Sky Shed pod was invented in Canada in the mid-2000s by Wayne Parker, a rock musician turned astronomy enthusiast. His goal was to make observatory domes affordable and practical for hobbyists. The dome's design was patented in 2011 and has since been adopted by thousands of backyard astronomers in over 30 countries. I saw this strange object at a brewery, and I think it might be some kind of game, but I'm not sure. There's a lever on the bottom right and a latch in the corner that looks like it could open the box. I even asked the waitstaff, but nobody had any idea what it was. This is a vintage Japanese pachinko machine, a mechanical arcade game that became incredibly popular in Japan during the mid-20th century. At first glance, it looks like a vertical pinball machine, but instead of using just one ball, pachinko operates with dozens of small steel balls. Players shoot the balls into the machine and watch them bounce through a maze of pins, hoping they'll land in special pockets that trigger a payout. I found this in an antique store, and it was hanging together with other old cooking items. The two cups at the end are scalloped like a cupcake liner. Does anyone know what it is? This is a vintage rosette and timbale iron, a kitchen tool used to fry thin batter into delicate pastries. The molds are heated in hot oil, dipped briefly into a light batter, then returned to the oil until the batter forms crisp little cups that are typically filled with sweet or savory mixtures. Tools like this were especially common in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and many families used them to create festive treats for Christmas or community gatherings. I found this piece hanging off the front bumper of my Audi. There's another identical one still attached on the right side. Does anyone know what this part is? What you've found is a deer whistle, a small device that mounts to a vehicle's front bumper. As the car moves, air flows through the whistle and produces a high-pitched tone, often ultrasonic. The idea is that the sound encourages animals to stay off the roadway, potentially reducing collisions. These whistles first became popular in the late 1970s and 1980s. Many states with high deer populations saw them adopted by drivers, and at one point, even some police fleets experimented with them. I keep seeing these colorful, spiky, ball-shaped objects on bus stops across London, and they appear in many different colors in my area. I'm really curious about what they are. These are handmade street art pieces known as spudniks. Each one is made from a real potato that has been pierced with brightly colored cocktail sticks. They serve no practical purpose. They are simply playful art installations placed on top of bus shelters to surprise people riding on the upper deck of London's double-decker buses. The artist behind them is widely believed to be an anonymous street artist known as No-Nose. He began placing these potatoes around East London in the mid-2000s, mainly in Hackney and Shoreditch, and the idea quickly became a small local legend. I found this strange green object inside my sister's acoustic guitar. It's curved and full of holes. Does anyone know what this thing is? What you've found is a dampit, a small humidifier designed for acoustic string instruments like guitars and violins. It's shaped like a flexible green tube with tiny holes and a sponge inside. It's placed inside the instrument to release moisture gradually, helping prevent the wood from drying out and cracking. This helps maintain the instrument's structural integrity, especially during dry winter months or in low humidity climates. The dampit was invented in the 1960s by Ralph Hollander, a professional violinist who created it after his valuable instrument developed a crack from dryness. Hollander patented the device in 1966, and it quickly gained popularity among musicians around the world. My neighbor found this strange metal object at a garage sale. It's made of soldered brass and has no markings on it. We're wondering if it might be some kind of old torch. Does anyone know what it is? This is a vintage Presto CB fire extinguisher, manufactured in the 1950s by Merlite Industries of New York. It was a fully functional brass fire extinguisher designed to tackle small fires. It worked by releasing a chlorobromomethane, a fire-suppressing chemical that turned into gas upon discharge, making it effective even on electrical or fuel fires. Originally marketed for motorcycles due to its compact size, the Presto CB was also used in cars, boats, workshops, and kitchens. Its simple twist valve system allowed for quick activation during emergencies. Production ceased in 1969 after chlorobromomethane was banned in the United States due to its health risks. Someone posted this object on our local community Facebook page, but no one seems to able to identify it. It looks like it's made of cast iron. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is an antique rain gutter end-forming tool, patented in 1898 by William Warren. This heavy cast iron object was used by tinsmiths and roofers to seal the open ends of half-round metal gutters by hammering the gutter's edge against its grooved surfaces. The two ends of the tool featured different corrugations, one to begin folding the gutter edge inward, and the other to crimp it tightly closed, creating a watertight seal without solder or end caps. Roofers used this tool through the early to mid-20th century, until it was gradually replaced by prefabricated end caps and seamless aluminum gutters. I keep seeing this target-like object hanging above escalators and stairs at metro stations in Delhi, especially at the elevated ones. It's made of a metal sheet and hangs by a wire. Does anyone know what this is for? What you're seeing is a bird deterrent used in many metro stations around Delhi. These metal discs with colorful concentric circles are designed to confuse pigeons and other birds by disrupting their depth perception. The patterns appear to float in the air, making it difficult for birds to judge distance or find a safe landing spot, so they tend to avoid areas where these are installed. The shiny metal surface also reflects light unpredictably as it moves in the wind, creating flashes and shifting shadows that add to the visual confusion. Dear viewers, after a year of running this channel, I have finally turned on channel memberships. If you enjoy my videos and want to support the channel, you can do that by clicking this button. Thank you. I found this on a hiking trail. It looks almost alien. The white berries grow on stiff red stems, which all connect to a single thin green vine. Does anyone know what this strange plant is called? This is a plant called white baneberry, more commonly known as doll's eyes. It's native to the hardwood forests of eastern North America and often grows in shady upland areas with loamy soil. The nickname doll's eyes comes from its distinctive white berries with black dots that resemble the glass eyes used in old dolls. Despite their unusual beauty, these berries are highly toxic to humans. They contain potent cardiac toxins that can have an immediate sedative effect on heart muscle tissue. Ingesting even a small amount can lead to cardiac arrest, which is why the entire plant is considered extremely poisonous. Interestingly, birds are immune to the toxins and play an important role in the plant's survival by eating the berries and dispersing the seeds. We picked up this extremely heavy object by the side of the road. It took 3 people to move it. The shiny rings on the left are 4 stacked ball bearings, each about 5 inches wide, and it looks like the bolts are holding it in place to keep it from rotating. What you found is a tool used in underground construction, known as a horizontal directional drilling swivel. It's part of a system that helps crews install pipes or cables under roads, rivers, and buildings without digging a trench. This swivel connects the rotating drill to the pipe, allowing the drill to spin while the pipe stays still. That prevents the pipe from twisting or getting damaged as it's pulled through the ground. The idea behind this tool appeared in the 1960s, when engineers in the United States began developing new ways to install utilities without tearing up streets or landscapes. It became especially valuable as cities expanded and needed to run new gas lines, water pipes, and communication cables without disrupting traffic or neighborhoods. I found this unusual rotating electrical machine at work. It has several gears, wires, and numbered markings on top, which suggest it may have been used for measurements or calculations. There are no labels or markings underneath. What you found is part of a mid-20th century telephone switching system known as a rotary line selector. Before digital electronics, phone calls were routed using electromechanical machines like this one. When someone dialed a number on a rotary phone, the selector advanced step by step through a series of electrical contacts until it reached the correct line, creating a direct connection between 2 telephones. These machines were the core of early automated telephone exchanges and gradually replaced human operators. The idea behind this technology goes back to 1891, when an undertaker named Almond Stroger patented the first automatic telephone switch. His invention led to the spread of dial telephone service in the early 20th century. By the 1920s and 1930s, rotary line selectors were used across the globe, forming a vast mechanical network that handled millions of calls each day. This was found in a box of items donated to a local museum that focuses on old farm equipment. One side is marked with H&E. It came from a farming community where people are still clearing out their grandfathers' and great-grandfathers' belongings. What you found is an antique cobbler's clamp. These clamps were used to hold shoes or leather tightly in place during stitching or repair. Early versions were made of wood and held between the knees, and by the late 19th century, more advanced models, were made of cast iron with crank mechanisms for added control. One of the most notable examples of this tool was patented by Alexander Davidson in 1880. His lasting clamp design, which featured double jaws and a screw tightening system, became widely used in small shoe repair shops and bespoke workshops. My grandma has this metal object on a chain. It's about 2 inches tall, 1 inch wide, and shaped like a hexagon. The cap doesn't come off, there are no holes. It also has some writing on the sides. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a pocket scrap magnet keychain. The small magnet inside allows you to instantly test whether a metal is ferrous or non-ferrous. These magnets first gained popularity in the mid-20th century, when American scrapyards, many of them family-run businesses, began handing them out to customers. Most of these keychains had the company's name, phone number, and material types stamped on the sides. I found many of these washed up on a beach just north of Auckland, New Zealand. They have short, brittle spines that are still quite prickly, and there's an opening underneath that looks like it could be a mouth. They definitely seem to be some kind of marine animal. Does anyone know what they are? What you've found are the remains of Echinocardium chordatum, commonly known as heart urchins or sea potatoes. These marine creatures live buried in sandy seafloors, and their short, furrowed spines help them breathe while underground. Once washed ashore, their fragile spines fall off, leaving behind pale, heart-shaped tests. Heart urchins inhabit shallow coastal waters in temperate regions, including areas around New Zealand. They burrow up to 15 centimeters deep and feed on organic particles gathered from the surface using their long tube feet. I found this old engine buried near the trailhead while hiking on Lookout Mountain in Golden, Colorado. It looks like an inline 6, but I'm curious where it might have come from. What you found is the remains of a Chevrolet Stovebolt 216, an early inline 6 engine that powered millions of Chevy cars and trucks from the late 1930s through the early 1950s. It earned the nickname Stovebolt because many of its screws resembled the slotted bolts used in old cast iron stoves, and it became famous for its rugged cast iron construction. This engine was Chevy's answer to Ford during the Depression era and helped the company dominate the low-cost car market. One of the most well-known vehicles equipped with this engine was the 1953 Corvette, which featured a high-performance version of the Stovebolt 6. Over the years, this engine was refined and even licensed for production abroad. Early models of the Toyota Land Cruiser, for example, were equipped with engines based on this very design. I found this wooden object on a cattle ranch. It's about 18 inches long and appears to be made of hardwood. Does anyone know what this might have been used for? What you've found is a traditional Irish shillelagh, a short hardwood stick that served both as a walking aid and a weapon. These sticks were typically carved from blackthorn or oak, and the wood was carefully dried, often in chimneys or smokehouses, to strengthen it and give it a dark, polished appearance. The shillelagh became iconic during the era of faction fighting, when rival Irish groups settled disputes through large stick fights. This period gave rise to the expression shillelagh law, which referred to resolving conflicts through force rather than through courts. Later, the stick's symbolism became a source of pride for Irish immigrants in America, most famously represented by the jeweled shillelagh trophy awarded during the Notre Dame versus USC football rivalry. My girlfriend found this shiny object on the ground and picked it up. At first, I thought it might be some kind of ruler or a tool for drawing perfect semicircles, but I'm not really sure. Does anyone know what this could be used for? What you found is a modern-day bullet journal calendar stencil specifically designed for drawing circular calendars and trackers. It's part of a larger trend in analog organization known as bullet journaling, where people combine planning with creative expression on paper. I came across this metal object in a charity shop. It looks like some sort of measuring device. The writing is in both Russian and English, and the measurement numbers don't seem to match any standard system. Does anyone know what this might have been used for? What you found is a gunner's quadrant, a precision instrument used to measure the elevation angle of artillery guns. Devices like this allowed gunners to calculate and adjust the angle of fire for indirect artillery where the target was not visible. The quadrant would be placed on a flat surface of the barrel or breech, and the crew would adjust the gun until the built-in bubble level showed the correct angle. Outside the battlefield, the basic concept of the quadrant has found its way into tools used by engineers, surveyors, and even foresters. We found about 40 of these on the beach during low tide in Massachusetts. They felt a bit like plastic, but also kind of organic. They were thin, and none of them formed a complete circle. They showed up in small clusters of 5 to 10, spread out along the shore. What you've found are the remains of moon snail egg masses, commonly known as sand collars. These unusual ring-shaped structures are created by female snails in the Ctesidae family, who lay their eggs in a gelatinous matrix mixed with sand. Each collar contains thousands of developing embryos, and once the young hatch, the structure breaks apart and washes ashore in fragments. Moon snails are ancient marine predators with a lineage dating back to the Triassic period. They live in sandy coastal zones and are known for boring perfect counter-sunk holes into the shells of their prey, mainly clams and other mollusks. I found this machine in an abandoned college pub. The pub shut down around 2012, but I don't know how old the machine itself is. It's covered in spiderwebs and has no clear labels. Does anyone know what this might have been used for? What you found is a vintage Electra Belle Epoque espresso machine. Electra, founded in 1947 by Umberto Fregnon in Italy, set out to create espresso machines that were both easy to use and visually striking. These machines were installed in cafes, university campuses, pubs, and even restaurants. The version you found likely dates from the late 20th century. I have this silver-plated gadget that's attached to a pocket watch chain. It originally belonged to my great-great-grandfather, who worked as a porter at an auction house. The pocket watch was already used when he got it, so it's quite old. Does anyone know what this might have been used for? What you found is a late 19th century cigar piercer, also known as a cigar punch or pricker. These tools were designed to create a small hole in the sealed end of a cigar, allowing it to be smoked without cutting off the cap. During the Victorian era, such gadgets were often carried as decorative fobs on a gentleman's pocket watch chain. This was found buried in an old-school warehouse while my dad was cleaning out some storage. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a World War II-era Morse code trainer used by the United States Army. It was designed to play pre-recorded Morse code messages using paper tape, allowing soldiers to practice copying code by ear without the need for a live instructor. The machine reads ink marks on the tape with a photoelectric sensor and converts them into audible beeps, simulating the dots and dashes of Morse code. It became standard equipment in Army signal schools starting in 1943. Its design was inspired by earlier civilian devices like the instructograph, but the military version used a more advanced optical system and was electrically powered for continuous classroom use. These machines remained in service into the 1950s and were later sold as surplus to ham radio operators in schools. I found this glass prism that measures about 3 inches across at the base. The bottom is shiny, but the rest of the surface has a matte finish. It doesn't look old since there are no chips or signs of wear. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a deck prism, a solid glass light designed to bring sunlight below the deck of a ship. Before the age of electricity, these prisms acted as natural skylights, safely illuminating cabins and cargo holds without the fire risk of oil lamps or candles. The flat top was set flush with the deck, so sailors could walk over it, while the pointed underside refracted sunlight into a soft glow below. The idea dates back to the early 19th century, when British glassmaker Apsley Pellat patented thick glass deck lights to brighten ship interiors. By the 1840s, deck prisms had become common on American whaling ships and naval vessels, especially those carrying flammable cargo like whale oil or gunpowder. These prisms were usually cast in hexagonal or round molds, then polished flat on top and left matte underneath to help scatter the light. I found this heavy metal object in my uncle's basement along with some old tools. It's marked Sargent and Greenleaf, Rochester, New York, patented July 20th, 1875. It has 5 holes on the back, with 1 in each corner and 1 in the center. There's also a hole on the right side that's about the size of a nickel. The object measures approximately 8 inches tall, 10 inches wide, and 4 inches deep. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is an antique time lock mechanism made by Sargent and Greenleaf of Rochester, New York. This device was designed to keep a bank vault locked until a preset amount of time had passed, even if someone knew the combination. That meant no one, not even the bank manager, could open the safe before the timer expired. It would have been mounted inside a vault door and used to block the locking mechanism until morning, helping to prevent robberies and hostage situations. The idea for the time lock came in response to a wave of bank robberies after the Civil War. Criminals began targeting bank employees instead of the locks themselves, using threats or kidnappings to gain access to vaults. James Sargent's invention, first installed in 1874, changed that. In one early case from 1875, thieves broke into the home of a bank treasurer in Massachusetts and tried to force him to open the vault before the start of the business day. But the new time lock held firm until morning, and the robbers left empty-handed. From that point on, time locks became standard security features in banks across the United States. I found this unusual item that looks a bit like an oil lamp, but I'm not exactly sure what it is. It has a tall glass tube, and one side is engraved with Roman numerals. Has anyone seen something like this before? What you found is an antique oil lamp clock. It works by slowly burning oil in a glass reservoir marked with Roman numerals. As the oil level drops over time, it lines up with the hour marks, giving a rough indication of the time. Oil lamp clocks first appeared in Europe centuries ago and became especially popular in the 18th and early 19th centuries. They were often used in homes, on ships, and even for nighttime reading or navigation. Whale oil, known for its clean and steady flame, was a common fuel. By the mid-1800s, these devices began to fade from use as mechanical clocks became more affordable and kerosene replaced whale oil. I found this old office machine during a neighborhood cleanout behind a school that was being emptied out. It looks like something used in an office. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a Gestetner mimeograph duplicator, a stencil printing machine that was widely used before photocopiers became common. It works by forcing thick ink through a waxed paper stencil wrapped around a rotating drum. The operator mounts the stencil on the drum, adds ink inside, and as the drum spins, pressure rollers pull each sheet of paper underneath, transferring the image through the stencil's openings. The mimeograph was developed in the late 19th century, with major contributions from 2 inventors, Thomas Edison in the United States and David Gestetner in the United Kingdom. Edison's version used an electric pen to perforate stencils, while Gestetner introduced the cyclostyle, a simpler tool that allowed users to cut stencils by hand using a small spurred wheel. Gestetner's system quickly became the standard across Europe and in many other parts of the world. I found this old Bell Labs case in our engineering workshop, but there's no information about what it used to contain. The box is made of thin metal and wood, and it looks like some parts are missing. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you found is a Shive wave machine, also known as a Bell Labs wave demonstrator. It was developed in the late 1950s by physicist John Shive at Bell Telephone Laboratories to visually demonstrate how waves move, reflect, and interfere. By twisting one of the rods, you can send a pulse down the line, showing wave behavior in slow motion. This device became famous through educational films used in American science classrooms during the 1960s and 70s. It helped generations of students understand wave concepts without needing complex mathematics. I came across this item that looks like a flashlight, but I couldn't find any power button. One side has circles labeled with measurements underneath. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a medical penlight with a printed pupil gauge. These compact flashlights are used by doctors, nurses, and paramedics to check a patient's pupils during neurological exams. The circles printed on the side help estimate pupil size in millimeters. The design dates back more than 100 years, with early versions appearing in the 1910s. By the 1940s, they were already widely used in both military and civilian medicine. I found this cute dish at Value Village for a few bucks. It has a raised center with a tiny ceramic house on top. Does anyone know what this might have been used for? This is a ceramic bowl called La Maison Inondée, which means the flooded house in French. It was created by artist Patrick Martinez. Originally designed for children, it's now often used to serve snacks or hold jewelry and other small items. These whimsical bowls are typically sold in museum shops. I found this small, heavy item in an Airbnb in New Zealand, near the fireplace. It seems to be made of copper or bronze and fits in the palm of my hand. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a modern replica of an ancient Chinese wine vessel called a jue. These small bronze tripod cups were used over 3,000 years ago in rituals to serve warm millet wine during ancestor worship ceremonies. The jue reached its height of popularity during the Shang dynasty and was an essential part of elite ritual life in ancient China. Although their use declined after the early Zhou dynasty, the vessel's distinctive form lived on in art, museum collections, and decorative reproductions. I've had this for a long time and can't remember where it came from. I know it contains mercury, but I have no idea what it's actually for. The metal rods inside stick out of the glass tube just slightly. Does anyone know what this thing is? What you found is a mercury switch. When the switch is tilted, the mercury slides over and connects the contacts, allowing electricity to flow. Tilting it in the other direction breaks the connection. Mercury switches have been around since the early 1900s and were commonly used in everyday appliances, older thermostats, alarms, and certain types of machinery. They were also used in devices where sparks had to be avoided, such as gas-filled environments or sensitive electronic systems. Because the contacts are sealed inside glass and touched only by the mercury, these switches are very reliable and don't wear out easily. I saw this machine in a warehouse full of old office equipment, but it didn't have any label or description. On the right side, there's a keyboard with the numbers 1 through 9 repeated 10 times, but no zeros at all. Does anyone know what it was used for? What you found is a Frieden SDW, a mid-20th century electromechanical calculator built for office use. These machines performed addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division using a complex system of gears and motors. Unlike simpler adding machines, the SDW could complete entire calculations automatically once the operator entered the numbers. The SDW was produced during the 1950s and 60s by the Frieden Calculating Machine Company, which was known at the time for building some of the most advanced and durable calculators on the market. Offices, engineering firms, and even aerospace companies relied on these machines. There was no zero key on the keyboard. Zero was entered simply by leaving a column blank. I found this while organizing tools at work. It looks like a small handheld device, and the end can be pulled out a bit. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a chip inserter, a small handheld tool used to install computer chips onto circuit boards without bending their pins. The metal slots on the side were used to straighten any pins that were bent, and the prongs on the end held the chip in place while it was pushed into its socket. This tool made it easier and safer to handle delicate parts that could easily break if pressed in by hand. I found this small plastic object on the floor of an Airbnb outside Boston. It's made of hard plastic and has a pointed tip. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a retractable sectioning pick. It's stored inside the brush handle and can be pulled out when needed. This tool is designed to part or section hair during styling. This innovation was described in a 2002 United States patent, which highlighted how the pick could be built into the brush handle without losing the ability to hang the brush on a hook. We found this in a family member's garage and have no idea what it is. It's made of plastic and opens like a clamp or some kind of gripping tool. Does anyone know what it's used for? What you found is a fistula arm clamp, a medical device used in dialysis care. And after the dialysis needles are removed, this tool helps stop the bleeding by applying gentle pressure to the access site on the patient's arm. It's especially useful for patients who have trouble using their hands or lack the strength to hold gauze in place on their own. A friend found this framed artwork at Goodwill, and we're not sure what to make of it. It looks like it could be old or inspired by Roman-style art, but we don't know if it has any value or history behind it. Does anyone recognize this piece? What you've found are magic lantern slides, early projection images made on glass and used in devices known as magic lanterns. These slides were used in the 19th and early 20th centuries for storytelling, lectures, and educational shows. They were often hand-painted or printed with vibrant illustrations and shown in sequence to tell a visual story. Based on the imagery, these particular slides may depict a scene from the classical legend of Damon and Pythias. I found this small key, about 3/4 of an inch long, among some things I was given after my grandfather passed away decades ago. It has a swastika shape at the end, and I have no idea where it came from or what it was for. What you found is a replica of a tiny lucky key charm from the early 1900s, originally made by English jeweler Charles Horner. The original design was created around 1910 as a good luck talisman. The charm combines two traditional symbols of fortune, the key representing opportunity and success, and the swastika, which at that time symbolized good luck, well-being, and prosperity. The swastika was commonly used in jewelry, postcards, and decorations long before its later association with Nazi Germany. We found these metal pieces in my grandma's basement along with some old pottery. There are 6 of them, and they seem to be part of a dining set. Does anyone know what they are? What you found is a set of antique knife rests, small dining accessories that were once used to keep greasy or dirty knives from touching the tablecloth. Knife rests became widely used during the Victorian era, a time when multi-course dinners and strict etiquette made them a standard part of a formal table setting. While simpler versions had existed earlier, by the mid-1800s, they were being crafted from materials like silver, cut glass, porcelain, and even ivory. I found this piece of metal in my grandpa's garage. It's about 14 inches long, with a sharp 3-scallop point on one end and a striking cap on the other. The whole thing is hollow and roughly 1.25 inches in diameter. What you've found is a 19th century whaling bomb lance, a specialized projectile once used by American whalers to hunt large whales. It was fired from a shoulder-mounted gun and designed to detonate a few seconds after impact, making the process faster and safer for the crew. This tool emerged at a time when whaling was not only a major industry, but a vital part of the American economy. Whale oil lit the lamps of homes and cities, lubricated machinery, and even served as a base for soap and cosmetics before petroleum took its place. By the mid-1800s, demand for whale products was at its peak. American whaling ships, especially from ports like New Bedford and Nantucket, sailed to the Arctic and the Pacific. Before the 1840s, whales were typically hunted with hand-thrown harpoons and lances. Eventually, these were replaced by shoulder-fired guns, which significantly improved both crew safety and the likelihood of a successful strike. The design of these weapons evolved rapidly. Inventors like Oliver Allen and Christopher Brand filed patents to improve range, accuracy, and reliability. Some models were even equipped with folding stabilizer fins that deployed in flight. I found this strange object at an estate sale. The wing-shaped part doesn't come out and can only rotate in a circle. I couldn't find any information about it online. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a poly-revolving nail polisher, a manual manicure device invented in the early 1930s to polish all 5 fingernails at once. The instructions included with the device stated that, hold the pulley, so that the leather buffer faces you, then push the oval bead away from you until it is at right angles. This forms the handle. Place the thumb and the 4 fingers into the recess provided for them, then take the handle with the disengaged hand and turn the handle in a circular movement. I found this heavy glass object in a thrift store donation box. It's about 10 inches tall and weighs at least 10 pounds. The disc inside spins, and there are 3 electrical contacts on top with wires running inside. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a rotating anode X-ray tube, a specialized device once used in medical and industrial imaging systems. Inside this heavy glass component is a spinning metal disc that served as the target for high-energy electrons. When the machine was activated, the disc rotated rapidly, allowing the tube to generate powerful X-rays. This design was a major breakthrough when introduced in the early 20th century. By spreading heat across the anode's surface, the rotating tube allowed for higher output, shorter exposure times, and clearer images. It proved especially valuable in hospitals and diagnostic centers. Models like this were commonly used in general radiography, fluoroscopy, and even the first CT scanners. I found this small metal object inside the wall of a Victorian house. It was completely rusted and hidden behind a brick. It has a hook on the back, and the windmill blades on the front spin freely. Does anyone know what this is? What you've found is one half of a Victorian-era belt buckle, most likely dating from the late 19th century. Windmills were popular symbols at the time, evoking pastoral life and Dutch scenery. This particular example includes a British registry mark, which means the design was officially recorded with the United Kingdom Patent Office. These marks can be decoded to identify the exact day the design was registered. This buckle was most likely made sometime in the 1870s or 1880s. My boss received this as a gift, and we're not sure what it is. It looks like it's made of jade and might be from China. It's about 8 inches long and sits on a wooden base. Can anyone help identify what it's for? What you found is a Chinese ruyi scepter, a ceremonial object traditionally used to symbolize power and prosperity. It was often given as a gift to express blessings and best wishes. The ruyi has deep roots in Chinese history, with examples dating back over 2,000 years. By the Qing dynasty, it had become a prestigious item among emperors and scholars alike. A ruyi was not only a symbol of authority, but also a kind of talisman, believed to grant success, longevity, and harmony to those who possessed it. I found this strange structure off the highway near Ypsilanti, Michigan. My boyfriend and I have no idea what it is, or how to even search for it. What you found is a cell phone tower known as the Domino's Farm Zigzag Tower, located just off US 23 near Ypsilanti, Michigan. The tower was commissioned by AirTouch Cellular, a predecessor of Verizon, and built in 1997 on land owned by Domino's pizza founder Tom Monahan. But Monahan had one unusual requirement. If a cell tower was going to be placed on his property, it had to be a work of art. So instead of a standard steel pole, architect Gunnar Burkhertz was brought in to design a structure that would be both functional and visually striking. The result is a blue zigzag tower with a white triangular cap at the top and a red equipment shelter at the base, all painted in Domino's corporate colors. Its zigzag shape was meant to represent a lightning bolt striking the earth. Today, the tower is still in active use and has also become something of a local landmark. I found this object with a dragon figure in the center that can be removed, revealing a small storage space underneath. It looks like it might be related to incense, and it has 128 holes. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is an ornate cribbage board. Cribbage is a card game that was invented in the early 17th century by the English poet Sir John Suckling and is still played today in many English-speaking countries. What makes cribbage unique is its use of a physical board for keeping score. Players use small pegs and move them through a series of holes as they tally their points throughout the game. This particular board features 128 holes, which is slightly more than the standard 121 used in traditional cribbage. That's because the additional holes near the center are used to keep track of the number of games won, not for the main scoring. Cribbage boards like this, especially those with dragon motifs and sculpted detail, were often made in China for export in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I found this device on the roof of a shopping mall, near a ladder. It looks like it might be some kind of security device since it seems to have cameras on it, but it also looks more complex than a typical surveillance unit. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a high-tech security device designed to monitor construction sites, rooftops, or other vulnerable areas where a traditional security guard might be too costly or impractical. The unit includes cameras, motion detectors, speakers, and bright flashing lights, all housed in a rugged, weatherproof shell. It automatically detects intruders, records video, and sends real-time alerts to a 24/7 monitoring center. When triggered, it floods the area with light, sounds an alarm, and loudly warns trespassers to leave immediately. If the threat continues, a live operator can review the footage and contact the police. I'm watching The War by Ken Burns, and I noticed these tubes on the back of an American soldier on Omaha Beach. I've seen a few D-Day documentaries before, but never noticed anything like this. Does anyone know what they were used for? This is a United States Navy life preserver, specifically the M1926 inflatable flotation belt. This type of belt was used by assault troops during amphibious operations and beach landings. It was inflated by squeezing two switches inside, which activated CO2 bottles. If the CO2 failed, the belt could still be manually inflated by blowing into rubber tubes equipped with Schroeder valves. The M1926 flotation belt was also used during the D-Day landings on the Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944, making it a significant piece of World War II history. I found this unusual object at an estate sale for $1. The handle is shaped like a Roman soldier's helmet, and there's a short chain attached to the side. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a repurposed pommel from a late 19th century Knights Templar ceremonial sword, likely manufactured between 1880 and 1900. Originally, this piece served as the decorative end cap of a Masonic fraternal sword used by members of the Knights Templar, a high-ranking branch within the York Rite of Freemasonry. During the height of American fraternalism in the late 1800s, owning such a sword was a mark of status and pride. At some point, this pommel was likely repurposed for opening letters. To do so, a sharp, curved element was attached to it. I found this strange box near a locked gate leading into a field. It's mounted on a tree and seems to be pointing across the opening. There's a loose wire hanging above it that looks like it was cut and could have reached to the other side of the gate. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a dormouse nest tube, a monitoring tool used by wildlife researchers in Europe. It's designed to mimic a natural hollow where a dormouse might build its nest, and these tubes are usually attached horizontally under a tree branch and left in place for several months. If a dormouse builds a nest inside, it confirms their presence in the area. Researchers can then gently check the tubes and relocate any animals to more permanent wooden nest boxes if needed. This method became standard in the early 2000s and is now widely used in conservation projects. I found this metal tool at a thrift store. It's about 5 inches long and looks like it was originally painted black, though most of the paint has worn off. One end is shaped like a spoon and the other like a ring. Both are slightly sharp. It has an inscription that reads Rochester, New York, USA. Does anyone know what this is? What you found is a pineapple eye snip, a specialized kitchen tool patented in 1901 by John Pack. It was designed to remove the tough, inedible eyes from a pineapple while preserving as much of the fruit as possible. At the time, pineapples were rare and expensive, and minimizing waste was important. In fact, pineapples were once so valuable that people would rent them to use as decorative centerpieces at parties rather than eat them. By the early 20th century, pineapples became more accessible, though they were still seen as a luxury. That began to change in the 1920s and 1930s, when James Dole revolutionized the industry through mass production and canning. Combined with improved transportation, this helped make pineapples affordable and available to the general public. By the middle of the century, they had become a common fruit in American households. I found this tall wooden cabinet in my boyfriend's family home. It was bought at an antique store in Germany and seems quite old. The front is wood veneer, and the middle section folds down like a writing surface. What you found is a lady's writing desk, a piece of furniture once used by the mistress of the house to manage domestic affairs. It served as a private workspace where she could pay household bills, organize invitations, plan meals for the cook, and write letters. The many drawers and compartments were ideal for storing stationery, calling cards, and receipts. Desks like this were seen as symbols of a woman's authority within the home, much like a chatelaine. Often, a newlywed would receive one as a wedding gift. Judging by the two-piece construction and the distinctive S-curve design on the drawers, your example may be a reproduction from the 1920s or 1930s, when this style saw a revival, particularly in the United States. I found this brass object at an estate sale in Chico, California. It has a hinged bracket for wall mounting and can swing about 180 degrees. Inside the glass cylinder is a slurry-like substance, similar in texture to melting snow, and it doesn't seem to react to temperature changes. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a storm glass, also known as a chemical weather glass or Fitzroy's storm barometer. This device consists of a sealed glass cylinder filled with a chemical solution that forms crystalline patterns depending on temperature. In the 19th century, people believed these changing formations could forecast storms, with feathery crystals said to signal approaching bad weather and clear liquid indicating fair skies. The original inventor of the storm glass is unknown, but the device is often associated with British Admiral Robert Fitzroy, who promoted it as a tool for maritime forecasting and helped bring it into widespread use. Its popularity peaked in the 19th century. Later studies showed that the device responds only to temperature changes and not to atmospheric pressure. I found this unusual object at an auction, but no one there could tell me what it is. It's about 18 inches long, with a wooden handle and a rounded end that's covered in leather. There's a metal plate on the side marked Pettibone Manufacturing Company, Military and Society Goods, Cincinnati, Ohio. What you found is an exploding clown paddle, a novelty gag device produced in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was a comedic prop used primarily by fraternal organizations like the Odd Fellows or in circus clown acts. The paddle has a hollow chamber inside that holds a blank cartridge, and when struck against a surface, it triggers a small internal firing pin that sets off the blank with a loud bang. The earliest known patents for this type of device appeared in the early 1900s. Several inventors and companies contributed to its development. Charles B. Post patented an amusement device in 1908 that closely matches the exploding paddle concept. This particular example was made by a well-known supplier of military and society goods, a term that referred to ceremonial regalia and props for fraternal lodges, military orders, and parades. Pettibone and similar companies supplied exploding paddles to lodges across the United States, where they were used in initiation rituals and mock ceremonies. Between 1850 and 1920, gadgets like these flourished, fueled by the era's love of physical comedy and the elaborate hazing rituals common in fraternal orders. We found this old device while cleaning out my grandfather's garage. It clamps to a table and it has a date stamped on it from February 1875. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a vintage apple peeler. This hand-cranked device was designed to quickly remove the skin from apples. By securing the machine to a table, placing an apple on the fork, and turning the crank, users could produce a continuous spiral of peel in seconds. It was a highly efficient alternative to peeling apples by hand and became especially popular in American farm kitchens during the late 19th century. The first United States patent for an apple peeler dates back to 1803, and by the 1870s, hundreds of inventors had submitted designs to improve the tool's function. Over time, features such as self-retracting blades and ejectors for finished apples were added. Makers like Redding Hardware Company and David Goodell produced some of the most successful models. These peelers became a staple in homes during the fall harvest season, when apples were processed for drying, cider, or pie making. I found this small metal component that spins very smoothly and has a ribbon cable coming out of the base. I'm not sure what it's used for. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a rotary video head drum assembly, the core mechanical component of a VHS video cassette recorder. This device houses tiny magnetic heads that spin at high speeds while the videotape is wrapped diagonally around part of the drum's surface. The motion allows the heads to record or play back high-frequency video signals by scanning diagonal stripes across the tape, a method known as helical scanning. The development of the rotary head drum was a major turning point in video recording history. Early tape recorders used stationary heads, and the tape moved past them in a straight line. The bandwidth achieved by this method was sufficient for audio, but video required a dramatically higher bandwidth. In 1956, engineers at Ampex solved this problem by placing multiple video heads on a rapidly rotating drum. This design created the extremely high relative speed required for video recording without accelerating the tape itself, and it made the world's first practical videotape recorder possible. Over time, the same spinning head principle was adapted into smaller and more affordable formats like VHS. I usually try to figure these things out on my own, but this time I have no idea. I came across this strange concrete structure and can't tell what it was used for. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is part of a coke oven battery, an industrial structure once used to convert coal into coke. The row of arched chambers seen in the photo is typical of what's known as a beehive oven battery, a design widely used in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Each dome-shaped chamber was filled with coal and then heated to extreme temperatures without air, gradually baking the coal into coke over the course of several days. These ovens were a vital part of the steel industry at the height of the Industrial Revolution. Entire towns once grew around coke plants like this, and the coke they produced was used to fuel blast furnaces that turned iron ore into steel, powering the growth of railroads, bridges, and factories. I found this old metal object sitting on the porch of a restaurant. I'm not sure what it is or how it was used. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is the base of an antique cream separator. These devices were used to separate whole milk into cream and skim milk using centrifugal force. Fresh milk was poured into a metal bowl at the top, and as the internal drum spun, the lighter cream flowed out through one spout, while the heavier skim milk exited through another. This technology revolutionized dairy work in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Before separators, farmers had to let milk sit for hours so cream could rise to the top. But thanks to inventors like Gustave de Laval, who patented the first continuous cream separator in 1878, the process became faster and far more efficient. By 1900, separators were widespread on farms throughout the United States and Europe, with companies like de Laval and Sharples leading the market. Even Sears sold an affordable version through its famous catalog, helping small farms adopt the technology. I came home for vacation and my dad told me not to touch this. The case is red and velvety, about 4 inches long and 2 inches wide. Does anyone know what it is? This is a solid fuel hand warmer, specifically a charcoal stick model similar to the Highlander warmers still used by outdoor enthusiasts today. Solid fuel hand warmers like this one have a long and fascinating history. The idea of using a smoldering ember for heat goes back centuries, with ornate metal warmers appearing in ancient China as early as the Song dynasty. In the modern era, American inventor Jonathan Ellis patented a charcoal fuel pocket warmer in 1891, and in 1923, Japanese inventor Neiichi Matoba introduced a platinum catalyst design known as the Hokkien Cairo, which helped popularize pocket warmers around the world. I found this steel cylinder near the Baltic Sea in southern Sweden. It has a hinged door and a metal ring on top, almost like a handle. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you found is a Swedish blast-protected guard post, known as the Splitter Skiddad Vacker M39, a steel sentry shelter introduced in 1939. It was designed to protect a guard from bullets and bomb fragments during attacks on military bases, coastal forts, naval depots, and other strategic sites. The cylindrical shape, thick steel walls, and narrow slits gave the guard the ability to observe the area while staying protected and to return fire if necessary. These guard posts were part of Sweden's larger effort to fortify key installations at the onset of World War II. Unlike traditional concrete bunkers, the M39 was prefabricated and equipped with a lifting ring so it could be transported and repositioned by crane. This made it a flexible defense solution that could be quickly deployed wherever added protection was needed. I saw this object in an antique store. It has a twistable knob at the bottom that seems to raise and lower the central part inside the case. The label says it was made in London. Does anyone know what this was used for? What you've seen is a precision assay balance, most likely manufactured by William Ainsworth & Sons, Denver, Colorado. Designed for extreme accuracy, this type of balance was used in mining laboratories to weigh tiny beads of gold or silver, known as buttons, which were produced during fire assay testing. Its delicate internal mechanism could detect differences as small as 1/10 of a milligram, which was crucial for determining the precious metal content of an ore sample. These balances became essential tools during the American gold and silver rushes of the late 19th century. Before companies like Ainsworth, most precision scales were imported from Europe, and repairs could be slow and costly. Ainsworth changed that by opening a factory in Denver in the 1880s, right in the heart of mining country. Dear viewers, after a year of running this channel, I have finally turned on channel memberships. If you enjoy my videos and want to support the channel, you can do that by clicking this button. Thank you. I found this small iron object at a street market in Italy. It's about 5 inches long and looks like it might have been part of a larger mechanism. Does anyone know what it is? What you found is the balance arm from an antique cast iron scale. This arm was the central component of a 2-pan equal arm balance, commonly used in shops and markets. The curved end held a bowl-shaped pan for weighing goods, while the heavier circular end supported standardized weights. This type of balance scale has been used for thousands of years, with origins dating back to ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire. The core principle of comparing two masses on a horizontal beam remained essentially unchanged throughout history. By the 19th century, cast iron models like this one had become standard equipment for merchants across Europe. I found this strange tool with a wooden handle and a rotating metal shaft. The head is flat and a little sharp, kind of like a flathead screwdriver, and it looks like it could be replaced with other tips. The shaft says, "Patent applied for." Does anyone know what it is? What you found is a vintage dogleg deburring tool, a hand-powered device used to remove burrs and sharp edges from drilled holes in metal. When the user gives the handle a quick spin, the offset shaft creates a flywheel effect, allowing the cutter to whirl around the edge of a hole and cleanly shave off any burrs. These tools were especially common in the mid-20th century, particularly in the aviation industry, where thousands of rivet holes had to be deburred by hand before final assembly. I saw this object hanging on the wall of a World War II themed cafe. It's about 2 feet long with a wooden handle and a large metal scoop on the end. Does anyone know what it is? What you saw is likely a 19th century laundry tool, commonly known as a passer, dolly, or plunger. These devices were essential for the labor-intensive process of washing clothes during that time. In the 1800s, doing laundry was a demanding household chore, typically performed by women. The process involved soaking clothes in hot, soapy water, agitating them to remove dirt, rinsing them thoroughly, wringing out excess water, and finally hanging them to dry. Passers were designed with a long handle attached to a metal or wooden base, often cone-shaped or perforated. To use it, the person would grip the handle and plunge the base into the wash tub, creating a suction effect that circulated water and soap through the fabric, helping to loosen dirt and stains. I found this unusual-looking instrument, but I don't know where it's from, when it was made, or how it's played. Does anyone know what kind of instrument this is? What you found is a lap steel guitar, a specialized instrument designed to be played horizontally across the player's lap. Instead of pressing strings to frets, musicians use a solid metal bar, known as a steel, to slide along the strings, producing long, fluid notes and expressive vibrato. This particular style of playing originated in Hawaii in the late 19th century. A young musician named Joseph Kikuku is credited with discovering the technique around 1889, and his innovations sparked a musical revolution. By the early 1900s, Hawaiian music featuring the steel guitar had become wildly popular across the mainland United States. To solve the problem of limited volume in acoustic models, inventors George Beauchamp and Adolf Rickenbacker introduced the first successful electric lap steel in 1932, nicknamed the frying pan. Through the 1930s and 1940s, lap steel guitars were everywhere, from Hawaiian trios and Western swing bands to churches and early blues ensembles. I saw these blue plastic covers placed on the tops of young fir trees in the forest. Each one seems to protect a small central bud. What are they used for? What you've seen is a tree browse protection cap, commonly called a Verbissschutz in German. These plastic caps are clipped onto the tops of young firs and other saplings to protect their central bud from being eaten by deer or other wildlife. The terminal bud is essential for vertical growth, and if it gets bitten off, the tree can become stunted or develop several competing leaders. These protectors are especially common in European forestry, where deer populations are high. Foresters began using them widely in the 2000s as a low-cost alternative to fencing or chemical repellents. I found this wooden object being used as a fall decoration at the hotel where I work. It looks like some kind of harvest tool, but none of the staff know what it actually is. Does anyone know what it is? This object is a butter worker, a specialized 19th century tool used to process butter after churning. Once cream was churned into butter, it still contained residual buttermilk, which had to be removed to prevent spoilage and improve texture. The butter worker made this step easier. It typically featured a sloped wooden surface and a roller. As the butter was pressed and rolled across the tray, the liquid would drain away, while salt could be worked in to help preserve the final product. Butter workers like this one were especially common in rural American farmhouses, particularly in German-American communities in Wisconsin. The technology continued to evolve, and in 1853, Letty Smith patented a labor-saving butter worker that introduced useful innovations, such as an ice drawer to keep the butter cool and a more efficient paddle mechanism. In the last video, I asked you to guess what this small metal cube might be used for. Everyone had great guesses, and many of you got it right. This item is a universal brake caliper tool used for winding back brake pistons of different sizes. Thank you to everyone who participated and shared your guesses. A special shout out to Engineer in a hickory stripe hat for being the first to correctly identify it. All right, it's time for another mystery item. Take a look at this flexible plastic object with small weights on each side. What do you think it might be used for? Leave your guesses in the comments and I'll reveal the answer in the next video. I'd like to give a special thank you to all my channel members. Your support truly helps this channel grow. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Your support motivates me to create more videos. See you next time.